Let's say everyone, you have a position and you see that a checkmating sequence would work only if there wasn't one defender. And you notice that you attack the defender, let's say a knight, with a rook. And you sacrifice the rook, the opponent takes, and now you have checkmating sequence. That is what we call a brilliant move. And chess.com in the engine, if this happens to you, everyone, listen to me. In the engine, it says you're above 600 elo. It says, I don't know, 1,200 elo chess, 1,400 elo, 1,500 elo, and yet in your rating you're still 600 elo. If that sounds like you, here's what you do, right? First of all, how do I know this? Well, I watched this guy, and as you can see, he's made some videos about brilliant moves, and he's done brilliant moves similar to that I've just described. So let's actually go to his YouTube channel. Here we go. He's quite a lot of subscribers. He explains his moves very reasonably. And as you can see, many of his videos are actually about his brilliant moves. Genius for this and whatever. Here, brilliant. And there's the brilliant color. Brilliant. He makes brilliant moves. And people actually don't believe him that he is a 600 elo chess player, like this guy says. Right? But he is. And this is so typical for 600 elo chess. They play in good games like they are 1,400 and better. That is what they play like. And yet they are 600 elo. Why is that? Let's break it down and how to improve, right? So the first thing that I'm going to say is continuity in your games. So this is positional understanding. So for example, consider this position. Let's take stock. So white played h3, weakened the king side. Black has a queen and two well-developed bishops pointing at the black king. So this is a plus this open file. The bishop of white doesn't do much here. The queen doesn't do much here. So you would assume that black is winning, which conventionally is right, although the engine doesn't really say it. Let's actually go to this game right here. So we see the game like this, right? And what we're gonna do actually is we're gonna start from the beginning. So kind of in a fast way. We see how it's pretty equal. Both sides have done some mistakes. But now where it gets interesting is right around here. White has a weakened king side. We've talked about this. And black has an ongoing attack, kind of. Right? So obviously, black threatens this move. It would work because the pawn is pinned. Now, as you can see, this requires positional understanding. You understand that this is a threat because it's pinned. And how do you respond to this? Well, you shouldn't play g3 like white did here, because g3 allows, and because of positional understanding you will see this. First of all, think about what you would play here, but it allows for queen takes g3, because actually this pawn is pinned and cannot take back. And after something like king h1, the queen continues the attack with all of these pieces and plays queen takes f2. And now black is up 2 pawns and basically threatens a huge checkmating attack if white doesn't sacrifice material right now. And we've just won 2 pawns and the king is completely open. Obviously, black is winning. For example, takes, like this. And now white is just going to lose. The king is way too open and black is up 2 pawns. With accurate play, black should win this game. Now, why do we say that there's opening principles? And this ties back to the key point, which is continuity in understanding the game. We say there's opening principles, we mentioned them, like have your bishops on good diagonals, don't overextend the pawns on your king side, ideally don't play h3, which is almost always an inaccuracy. Like if you don't follow these things and your opponent does, then your opponent unfolds an attack in which all of his pieces work together to checkmate you or to win significant material, like here. And continuity, which is what I have proposed in this point, obviously then allows you to understand, alright, the opponent played g3. How do I punish this move? Obviously, queen takes g3. And if you would just ask yourself this question as white, with every move that you play, how does the position change? How do the pieces of my opponent and the pieces of myself work together? Right? If you would do this, then you wouldn't make moves like g3, because you see, alright, these pieces move together, they are well developed, they move together in an attack, right? So what should you have played instead? Well, you probably wouldn't have wanted to overextend your king side once again. So let's see, what could you have played? Something like this would be a reasonable move because, well, it's not the most accurate one, but it prevents the attack of unfolding, offers a trade of material, and no one is really worried. But what do we want to do? We want to control as many squares as we can. We want to create threats for the opponent, ideally countering the threats from the opponent with stronger threats by ourselves. So right here, something like 95 would have been a beautiful move because now black doesn't actually threaten anything. If black takes right here, the danger level that you've induced, this is what it's called in chess, is that you take the queen. So the queen has to move somewhere. And at the same time, you're controlling all of these squares and some of these squares passively. And with your knight, you're right in the opponent's territory. And if your opponent wants to do anything about it, after he's moved to the queen, of course, he's going to have to weaken his king side with f6. So as you can see, this is a really powerful move. At the same time, black cannot play something like queen takes g3 because you haven't weakened your king side here with white. If something like this was played anyways, then again, continuity, positional understanding, what would you play here in this situation? Notice how we cannot take the queen because the pawn is pinned, but with continuity, you can ask yourself as well, how can I induce the change so that it is favorable for me? Well, let's block the bishop. And now the bishop and the queen is attacked. If he wants to save his queen, for example with this move, then, well, he's going to lose the bishop. Actually, the best move for black here is to sacrifice the queen. And now white is completely and utterly winning. Up 6 points of material, up a queen. I hope that it became really tangible how key this really is. If you know how your pieces move together, if you know why the principles exist and then you move like them, then you will make far less blunders. But everyone, it's not just continuity such as this and asking yourself how every move changes something in your position, but it's also the blunders. You've got to ask yourself, is any piece hanging with a move? What can my opponent do with a move? For example, here black actually didn't go for taking on here, which is superior, but it took with bishop takes h3, which is a fine move also. Black is still winning and one pawn, still threatening this right here. But actually, some moves later, black blundered the queen just by moving it here. So obviously this is instantly losing. If you play such moves, this is another telltale sign that you're 600 elo, because you just cannot make these moves. You've got to ask yourself, what would I do as my opponent if I played this move? Because obviously you would just take the queen. These moves, you cannot do them. Just, I don't know, man, this is just discipline. Just be disciplined and you won't make these moves. Alright, moving on. The short-term improvement is learning from mistakes. Obviously you can follow principles and you can have a continuous positional understanding, right? Like right here, clearly black is winning with all of these pieces working white at the king and threatening to, I don't know, build a major attack. So this is just very problematic for white. And a principle in chess, many will tell you, is to keep adding pressure if you're better in a position. So how can you do this in this position? Well, you can play knight to d4, but it turns out knight to d4 is actually a mistake. Because think about it, knight d2, what would you play here as white? Well, what is black threatening? Black is threatening to take this knight and damage white's king structure, but white can actually benefit from this, kind of, by playing this move, knight bd2. And with knight bd2, yes, black can still take and black would be better off, but at the same time, black has helped white develop a piece and traded off some attacking material. So this is not really optimal here for black to play. If instead black would have taken instantly and white would have taken back, obviously with the queen, in order not to damage the pawn structure, then what you could have played is you could have trapped the rook. And so because of this, knight d4 was a mistake, because you could have just taken back, and then played this. I hope you see then that on the next time you will hopefully not make this mistake again, because if you've understood why a certain move was superior than another, then you probably in the same situation will make the superior move. So this is only short-term improvement. Why do I call it short-term improvement? Well, obviously black has gotten better now, because black won't play this move anymore. But just by fixing mistakes is not that you fundamentally become better at chess. Before moving to the next point, here black actually did another mistake, which this time was much more fatal, because black decided to take white here. Now this brings the whole game to even, if white plays correctly the next few moves. I will give you the tip. It has to do with this bishop and this rook and this knight and this bishop and this queen. So look carefully what you see right here, and then write in the comments how white can equalize in this position. I will not tell you, just look in the comments or write a comment. But the thing is, everyone, short-term improvement is learning from mistakes. But if you want to fundamentally become better at chess, not just incrementally, but fundamentally, notice the key difference here, then just fixing your mistakes and understanding the mistakes is not the way. The way then for long-term improvement is actually studying games from chess masters and understanding why they move, thinking what you would have played, thinking why their move works, and ideally doing this with structured resources. The way I do that is I did this in Notion. In Notion, I have a theory and game study database. If you're familiar with Notion, this is really not that complex and not that hard to set up. And here's a game study from the book Logical Chess Move by Move, which I also have as a PDF here in my resources database. But let's go back here. This is that I organize my game studies of chess master games, of which I've studied 3 so far and have inputted 2 into Notion. The reason I did this in Notion is that it just organizes all of my study so well. So here with the link, I've actually inserted the leisure study. And if I wanted to, I could years later, of course, go here. I have the annotations. I've actually gotten this book from a game, Logical Chess Move by Move, as I've told you. And here in this game, actually white played h3, which is obviously an inaccurate move. You don't want to weaken the king side, and like brutally punishes this on the next moves expertly. So with h6, I never would have played h6 here. I would have thought, all right, I don't want to weaken my own king side, but the idea is to go for an attack, go all in, and then add pressure with the rook. White cannot handle this. Only the computer could, but back then, there's just no way that without perfect play, you handle this well. And here, white played queen e2, g5 was followed, then this to prevent a pawn break, and g4, and here white decided to take. And now with rook g8, adding pressure, the bishop blocking the pawn from advancing right here. So actually, let me make this error again. And yeah, white decides to take the free pawn, and now all of the attack unfolds. I'm going to make a video on this game, but it just shows you how an expert such as black here, I don't know who that is going to be, Duobaski or Sultan BF. I suppose Sultan BF punishes this inaccurate play and specifically decides not to castle here, and instead go for the attack. It just tells you so much on how to attack when the opportunity is there, and how to induce moves that weaken the structure of your king, so much so that eventually, now after the bishop has taken, white has officially lost already. After knight takes on g4, there's 2 attackers and 2 defenders on this piece. So let's say that white would take back. Well then, black, I have marked this here already, as you can see. Black will take, and now the queen has to move away. Let's say it moves to d2. And now, as you can see, I've marked this. The pieces once again work together to create an attack. With bishop f3 here being played, the rook pinning the pawn, and something like this following, winning the bishop, and moreover threatening on later moves something like this. So black is winning. Let me actually show you how. Let's say white plays something like checking the king, then c6, white probably save the bishop. So this, and now there's mate in 2. With rook takes, the king has to move, and the queen right here. So there's this threat going on of mating at all times. What can white possibly do against it? Actually, the computer says this is the best move, and then this is the best move. And here white was supposed to sacrifice the bishop, so it just takes another few moves for black to checkmate. There's nothing that white can do to stop it. If something like this is played, well then, again, this, as we've seen, already results in mate, and here queen h4 follows, and it's just mate. These chess master games, in my opinion, are such a good way to see how an attack unfolds, and to see how an expert punishes weak and inaccurate moves. And I actually use Notion to organize my game studies, and if I wanted to, I could also write within Notion on this page about things that I found striking, or like the analysis part. I could write this down in Notion, why a certain move was inaccurate, for example, or why a certain move works. Okay everyone, so now we know the importance of positional understanding. We know that it's important to fix your mistakes short term, and we know how to improve in the long run. I hope that I have been helpful to you in this video. If you want to use Notion like I do in order to become better at chess, you can also structure your training in it. You can also write down thoughts, create a training program. You can track your training. So for example, what did I do today? I did tactics, I did game studies, whatever it is. Notion is very customizable. You can do whatever it is basically that there is to organize. You can do this perfectly well in Notion, much better than in any notes app. I used to be doing reflections in chess in my OneNote and it was so messy, but I don't want to sell you too hard. If you want to, you can click the link in the description for a time limited offer where you can get the same Notion system that I use to improve your chess and to organize your chess. If you've never been using Notion before, this shouldn't be too hard. Notion is really just a normal software like Word, like Excel is. It's even easier than Excel. It is meant for intuitive use, so that shouldn't be a problem. I also have a tutorial on it if you purchase it. I don't want to sell you too hard. This is it with the video. Consider subscribing, leave a comment, write down your thoughts, and this is it with the video. See you in the next one. Bye.